I think you're good to go.
Okay, good evening. I call this meeting to order. This is the Land Use Zoning Committee of the City Council. All committee members are present or will be shortly for this evening via Zoom. This is a remote or online meeting where all participants will be on a video or audio conference. We're holding this meeting remotely so that everyone can participate safely while we are conducting business under a public health emergency. We appreciate your patience as we get accustomed to virtual meetings. Members of the public will be able to speak to the committee if they have signed up for public comment, per the rules published on Friday with tonight's agenda. Before each agenda item begins, members of the public will be moved from the Zoom waiting room into the meeting room. They will remain muted until they are called upon to speak, at which point they will have 2 minutes to provide comment to the committee. After that, they will again be muted. Between each of tonight's agenda items, members of the public will be moved in and out of the Zoom waiting room accordingly. We will now move on to the agenda item A09. We do have a quorum. Will the Zoom moderator please move in all members of the public who signed up to speak for this item? For those joining us for this agenda item, that is A09, if you're watching the YouTube live feed for this meeting, please mute or turn it off at this time. The first item we'll be discussing, Councillor Benton, is Councillor Benton 09, adopting a zone map amendment to establish a character protection overlay zone in the integrated development ordinance for the North 4th corridor with regulations related to building massing and scale for development in the area and references to street cross sections in the development process. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the purpose of discussion, I'll move a recommendation of a due pass on 020-9.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Staff and members of the public are required to be sworn in for this agenda item. City staff who may speak to this item, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Councilors, Ms. Schultz is going to give an overview of the bill and address any questions we may have. We will then consider an amendment, hear public comment, and defer this bill to our next LUPS meeting. Ms. Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I will give a brief overview of 020-9, which proposes to create a new character protection overlay zone for the North 4th corridor. We did discuss this item at the LUPS meeting 2 weeks ago, so my overview will be brief, and I will also present on a proposed amendment. This character protection overlay zone follows the same boundary that the now rescinded North 4th Rank 3 corridor plan followed. It proposes to regulate building mass and scale related to building heights and building step back. And it also points to the development process manual for proposed roadway cross sections. So thinking about how the public right-of-way should be developed when a private property owner comes in to develop adjacent to 4th Street. We did hear comment on this item last week that there might have been a couple of items missing from the character protection overlay zone. This is due to a gap in the comprehensive plan, which designates the centers and corridors of the city. There is a Main Street designation for most of the 4th Street corridor, minus about 10 or so blocks. And some of the provisions that we proposed for the CPO spoke directly to that Main Street corridor designation. Well, for those 10 or so blocks where there is no Main Street designation, we wanted to make sure that those 10 blocks still received those protections that we're considering in the CPO. So there is an amendment sponsored by Councilor Benton tonight that will speak directly to making sure that the articulation and design standards in the CPO cover the entirety of the corridor, and also add setback requirements of 10 to 15 feet to development adjacent to the corridor. With that, I'll stand for any questions that the committee might have about the CPO.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Councilors, are there any questions for Ms. Schultz? Councilor Benton.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand properly there. I'll do it, try to do it next time. So part of the question here, Ms. Schultz, that I have is this amendment in relation to the other amendments to the IDO that are in the next item, and how that relates to, I realize that the existing interim guidelines do not include this area, or do they?
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, the interim design guidelines that are in place today do cover the entirety of the corridor. So the amendment that you've sponsored tonight will ensure that that continues into the future with the CPO.
Okay, because we're talking about, I mean, I think what we're considering, I've been asked and I'm amenable to it, the idea that they should track together at the next LUPS meeting. This would maintain the protections in place if we just leave it. However, if we amend it, does it change? It wouldn't change in a regulatory way anything until it's passed by the council, right? So.
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, that's correct. We're not, the interim guidelines will be in place no matter what action the council takes tonight.
Right.
Those were in place for 1 year or until the IDO is updated. And so those continue to be effective through this adoption process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. So is there another amendment within our iPads that we need to move? According to my script, maybe not.
Madam Chair, there is only one amendment to be moved.
Which we already did. Councilor Benton?
Yes, we did already move it, right? So.
Yes, so I think at this point we go to public comment.
Yeah, thank you.
So we, unless councilors have anything else to say or any questions? Seeing none, we will go to public comment in this matter. Is there anyone signed up to speak on this bill?
Madam Chair, there are several members of the public signed up to speak. I will go ahead and read those names in order now.
First of all, let's talk about the public comment ground rules. Comments are to be addressed to the committee members only. Please keep your comments germane to the agenda item you are speaking on, and any disruptive conduct or non-germane comment is removed from the Zoom meeting room. There will be a 2-minute time limit. The timer will start once you begin speaking. Then when your time is up. And since you're going to be sworn in, as each of you is ready to speak, I will ask you to raise your right hand.
I can do that individually.
Okay, thank you. Therefore,
okay, the first member of the public signed up to speak is Anthony Rial. I do not see Anthony Rial in the Zoom waiting room. Okay, so we will move on to the next speaker, who is Loretta Naranjo Lopez. Ms. Naranjo Lopez, before you begin your testimony, can you please raise your right hand for me? Do you swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Great, please proceed.
So this is resolution for the 4th Street overlay zone, or is okay. And I think I had it. We just wanted to support our neighbors to the north and recommend approval. And we also want to look at our areas having a historic overlay zone, which we requested back in 2018, or when the IDO was being reviewed. So that's all I wanted to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Naranjo Lopez. We'll go to the next speaker, Ms. Schultz.
The next speaker is Commissioner Debbie O'Malley, who I do not see on the call either. So we will move on to the next speaker, who is Peggy Norton. Ms. Norton, could you please raise your right hand for me?
Yeah,
Do you swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Great, please proceed.
Well, I'm pleased to be able to work at this time and go between the YouTube and this. And I did speak comments last time and the 2 concerns that we had. I do support it at this time, and thank you all for your work on this. Oh, and I am, as president of the North Valley Coalition, doing that. And we also have an executive committee meeting tomorrow, and we will be confirming it as a group. We've sort of not had a lot of Zoom. We haven't had any Zoom meetings yet. And
Ms. Norton, thank you so much for your comments. Do you have more that you would like to say?
no, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Ms. Schultz?
All right, our last speaker for this item is Peggy Neff. Ms. Neff, could you please raise your right hand for me? Do you swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury? Your microphone is muted at this time. Go ahead and unmute it. You're muted again. You unmuted yourself for a moment. There you go.
I do.
Great. Please proceed.
Although I'm not in the neighborhood there, I do want to recommend the pass of this ordinance. Although I believe that we have a major problem in regard to part of the IDO 6-4 E1D, where it asks for 51% of the residents in that area, the property owners in that area, to approve of a CPO. This didn't happen in this case, and I don't think it should be applied to any neighborhood who feels that they lost protections for their community. I think that the CPOs are a way of getting past what I think was marginalization and discrimination against neighborhoods and communities when the IDO was imposed on us. Compare it to the West Sequoia Neighborhood Association, where the North Valley Plan was in place, and now that was taken away without any discussions with neighborhoods. Now we see a whole advent of commercial activity all across Alameda, which was supposed to be reserved for non-commercial activities to the south, and then compare it to Martineztown and to the Historic Neighborhood Alliance groups who use their sector plans to continually develop and translate their heritage and their cultural sensitive natures that now no longer have access to that. I don't understand why Martineztown, given their situation with challenging the legality of the IDO, why they weren't included in this. It's only a few blocks away and could easily have been addressed to adapt some of those problems that they feel that they're facing now with the loss of their sector plans. You also have to look at whole communities that have been marginalized when R27011 has been taken out, when harmful issues were able to be deliberated upon, and now that's gone.
Ms. Neff, thank you. Your time is up. Thank you for speaking with us this evening. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're really talking about the North Fourth CPO and not Martineztown, but since it's been raised now twice by speakers, I wonder if staff could address what has been done in Martineztown, and that there is a CPO for Martineztown. If they could, please.
Sure, Madam Chair, Councillor Benton, that's correct. When the IDO was adopted, a character protection overlay zone was created for the Martineztown Santa Barbara area. It's called CPO 7. And I have that in front of me. It covers items such as lot width, required usable open space, setback standards, maximum building heights, has some specific sign regulations. And it looks like there's some specific regulations related to paid parking lots as well. So you are correct that there is a CPO already in place for this area.
And just to be clear, Madam Chair, as with this CPO, I mean, we can make the Martineztown Santa Barbara CPO more robust by amendment. And the fact is, at the time of adoption of the IDO, the CPO for that location, that neighborhood, was the original sector plan from back in I believe it was around in the mid 80s or early 80s, and a couple of efforts were made to try to update that didn't bear fruition. And at that time, when we were talking about the IDO adoption, I met with Ms. Naranjo Lopez, and we talked about establishing this CPO, and she was supportive at that time.
Microphone is cutting out. Difficult.
I've been having a mic problem, I think. She was supportive at that time, and I stand ready to continue to work with the neighborhood on amendments to that character protection. So, thank you.
Councillor Benton, are there any other questions, councillors? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have one other person who signed up to speak who has joined the call since we called public commenters. That's going to be Commissioner O'Malley. Commissioner O'Malley, please go ahead and proceed with your public comment.
Thank you all very much. It's interesting that it's not in sync with the YouTube and getting on the call, but nonetheless, I just wanted to weigh in and thank you for, I want to also weigh in and in support of the overlay zone. I think that's very critical for us to get that through, especially since we're having more development along the corridor, mass scaling. All these things are very important, including I think upgrading our design standards. The question I do have though is, so is this comment is just for the first amendment, or am I supposed to comment on both amendments?
Commissioner O'Malley, just for this amendment.
Okay. All right. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman, I think that concludes our public comment. Would you like to wrap this up?
Yes, so I think I do need to move the amendment to the bill, which is an amendment. Am I right, procedurally?
That's correct. And I will second that motion to move the amendment. Yeah, Councilors, is there any comment?
Are you looking for a second, Madam Chair?
I seconded it, but we'd welcome another one, Councilor Gibson.
Okay, I'll be number 2, second.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Go ahead and vote.
Counselor Benton,
Councilors, we're doing a roll call count. If you would please respond when his name is called. That was Councilor Benton, and I think he's had some technical difficulties.
Counselor Borrego,
Councilor Borrego? Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
I can't hear her. Councilor Gibson?
Yes?
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Councilor Harris?
Yes.
That's a yes.
and Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes on a 5-0 vote.
All right. Thank you, councilors. We appreciate that. Everyone's having a little bit of technical difficulty tonight. So let's move on. Okay, I'm going to move it to, the next question we have to do is, are there any questions or comments? There weren't any. I'm going to move deferral until the next LUPS meeting, August 12th. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, councilors. We will once again take a roll call vote.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, everyone. We're a little shaky this evening on this one, but we'll get it. We will now move on to agenda item B010. Will the Zoom moderator please move in all members of the public who are signed up to speak for this item? And there's going to be a little pause in the action for you at home. Thank you. I think we have all of you ready to participate now, those who have signed up. For those joining us for this agenda item, if you are watching on the YouTube live feed for this meeting, please mute or turn it off at this time. Councilor Benton, would you like to move 010?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Doris, do you have a presentation for us?
Good evening, Madam Chair and councillors. Yes, this is the second LUPS hearing on the first annual IDO update. The first hearing was 2 weeks ago on June 10th, and the presentation on June 10th, the meeting on June 10th included a staff presentation with an overview of each amendment and public comment. To remind folks who may have joined us last time, or for folks who are new to this, there are 2 packets of amendments before us this evening. Packet A are the amendments that are from the EPC application, and these respond to the red line that is Exhibit 1 to O10. The red line of the IDO contains all of the tech edits as proposed by the planning department. Each amendment is formatted to address the page numberings and sections and text of that red line document. Packet B has amendments that are in 3 different categories. They are either a response to an EPC condition, they are a response to an EPC discussion, or a third category, they are new and in response to constituents' concerns that have been raised since July of 2019. I'm now going to share my screen with you and just go through a very short presentation that is going to cover just a couple of items that have come up from the public with discussion in the last couple of weeks. So the first item that has come up is there are 2 amendments in the packets. There is a cluster development amendment, which is A4, and an amendment titled Conservation Development, B4. In order to sort of provide a little bit more clarity on these 2 amendments, I'm going to go through a timeline associated with them. So in July of 2019, with the EPC application, the council memo proposed a revision to cluster development. That is now A4 in the packet. This revision to the cluster development would require that homes be kept in small clusters of about 15, with areas of open space preserved between them. In response to this proposed change to cluster development, the EPC recommended in July of 2020 the creation of the conservation development form. This would not require the small clusters of homes as required by the council memo. This conservation development format is pretty much exactly the same as cluster developments today, unrevised. In June of 2020, so this month, the EPC, in response to the EPC recommendation in Packet B, there is an amendment, B4, that proposes to strike all references to conservation development. Because there are 2 amendments on this, there's a table in each amendment that has an explanation of how voting on in different ways on these 2 amendments would have different outcomes, depending on what the desire of the council is. The second review topic is liquor retail in the mixed use medium zone. Today in the IDO, liquor retail in the mixed use medium zone is a permissive use, with the exception that when it's within 500 feet of a residential property, zone district, or a non-residential parks or open space zone district, or a group home use, the use is conditional. In addition, the IDO carried over the protections from the sector plans, and so liquor retail is prohibited unless it's accessory to a grocery store in the downtown neighborhood area, the East Downtown Character Protection Overlay and Historic Protection Overlay, the North 4th Street area, the South Yale area. It is prohibited regardless of a grocery store in the Nob Hill Highland area, and it is prohibited in the University neighborhood area unless it's associated with a grocery store and west of University Boulevard. Amendment A11 in your packet makes the following recommendation: that liquor retail be a conditional use in the mixed use medium zone. This would not make any changes to any of the use specific standards. However, it would be conditional regardless of its proximity to residential, a non-residential park or open space, or a group home. But it would not make any changes to those sector plan protections that carried over into the IDO. The next topic of review is cumulative impacts. This is Amendment B21 in the packets. This amendment proposes to create a new procedure to require the study and mitigation of certain uses and their potential cumulative impacts on nearby residential developments. As drafted, this amendment applies citywide to properties that meet all of the following criteria. You're located within a quarter mile of a residentially zoned property. The proposed use is within the motor vehicle, transportation, and industrial categories, and is within 660 feet of another use within those same categories. If all three criteria are met, a cumulative impact study must be reviewed by the EPC. I'm now going to move on to the three amendments that had revisions in the packets that went out on Friday. 660 feet. The first packet amendment that had a revision associated with it is A17, site lighting. This revision added an exemption for lodging uses. The site lighting amendment requires that all sources of light measure at 300-foot Lamberts when measured from the property line. And this revision would exempt lodging uses from this, as they are very similar to residential uses. A18 is the transit parking reduction amendment. This amendment proposes to increase the peak frequency of for the 30% reduction in off-street parking from 15 minutes to, oh, Mike, hang on a second. Well, that was dramatic. The front door just flew open. I think we're getting a rainstorm. So back to A18, transit parking reduction. This would increase the peak frequency from 15 minutes to 30 minutes to receive the 30% reduction in off-street parking. And it also adds back the 10% reduction for properties within a quarter mile of transit service. The revision to this amendment adds an exemption for the university neighborhoods area. The university neighborhoods has quite a heavy amount of on-street parking in the area due to their proximity to UNM and CNM. In addition, the IDO has a lot of parking reductions associated with premium transit, and much of the university area is impacted by that premium transit. There is concern that these additional off-street parking requirements in this area, where there are already parking concerns, and these parking reductions would make parking more of an issue in the area. And so the university neighborhoods through this revision would be exempted from this subsection of the IDO. And the last amendment that has revisions, the sponsor for this, Councillor Bassan, has requested that this amendment be withdrawn. I'll still review the proposed changes to this, as we may have some public comments on this. So the Amendment B5, density and multifamily development. The previous amendment focused on adding dwelling units per acre as a way to limit intensity on a site. However, in order to address some concerns from the community, the amendment was revised to shift the focus from density to usable open space. The amendment proposed to add 50 extra square feet of usable open space per unit in the RML, MXT, and MXL zone districts on lots adjacent to low-density residential use in the RA, R1, and RT zone districts when they are not within an urban center, activity center, economic center, main street, major transit, and premium transit area. However, this amendment has been requested that it be withdrawn from the packet before the councillors vote on it. That is all of my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Councilors, do you have any questions? I see no hands going up. Therefore, we will go to public comment. Is there anyone signed up to speak on this bill?
Madam Chair, there are several members of the public signed up to speak. I will go ahead and begin calling their names now.
Let me give the ground rules one more time, just in case. We do have public comment ground rules. Comments are to be addressed to the committee members only. Please keep your comments germane to the agenda item you are speaking on, and any disruptive conduct or non-germane commentary will result in removal from the Zoom meeting room. There'll be a 2-minute time limit. The time will start once you begin speaking, and I will let you know when your time is up. Thank you.
Okay, our first member of the public is Nancy Bierce. Miss Bierce, are you connected? I do see Miss Bierce in the room. We will give her a moment to unmute her microphone.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Please proceed.
Wonderful. Good evening, councilors. As you heard, my name is Nancy Bierce. I am speaking in support of Councilor Davis's amendment for liquor retail as a conditional use in MXM zones to the ordinance or the O-2010. Without this amendment, you ignore statistics regarding the density of retail packaged liquor sales with increases in criminal behavior and the deterioration of business corridors and residential neighborhoods. As a whole, our city realizes no benefit from any business that inflicts this burden on its public. It is a liability that has shown to draw down on city resources. It is a liability that impacts economic development and investment in the city. Reduced investment coupled with increased liabilities diminish the city's financial capabilities, such as low-interest public bonds, leaving the citizens' tax dollars to pay higher interest rates over a 20 to 30-year span. That's my comment. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Bierce. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Sal Perdomo. Mr. Perdomo, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the LUPS Committee. My name is Sal Perdomo with Titan Development, and I'm here to speak to the IDO amendments and red lines. We appreciate you and your staff's efforts on the IDO and understand this has been an incredibly heavy lift by all. I'm here to speak on 2 items, Amendment B2 and Amendment B21. Amendment B2 increases the maximum building height across various zoning categories by 3 feet to accommodate for parapet and proper floor height. I'm in full support of Amendment B2 as it will allow for proper design and the needed flexibility to create both functional and visually appealing buildings. Next, Amendment B21, the Cumulative Impact Study Amendment. I do not support Amendment B21 for the following reasons. First, Amendment B21 will have a direct negative impact on economic development efforts by delaying and deterring economic-based job creators. Many businesses in the industrial and transportation use categories are important job creators for our economy, and adding additional regulation will create barriers of entry for these groups. We want to promote a pro-business climate in Albuquerque, not an anti-business climate, and this amendment directly supports the latter. Second, Amendment B21 is a blanket amendment that is reactionary to one specific and isolated neighborhood. This amendment should not burden the entire city. Lastly, Amendment B21 has not been properly vetted and does not have the details necessary to be implemented. This amendment will have major implementation challenges that will place undue burden on the applicant and their project. For these reasons, I'm strongly opposed to Amendment B21 and ask that the LUPS Committee recommend denial of this amendment. Lastly, I would like to also ask that the red line comment section 5-7C2 be removed. This is the red line that states walls shall not encroach into public water lines.
Mr. Perdomo, you'll wrap up your comments, please. Your time is up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you again for your efforts.
Thank you.
Our next public speaker is Dan Regan. Mr. Regan, go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Amendments. That's the 22 in A and 22 in B and 18 in A. Now we've got 40 amendments in 2 minutes is absolutely insane for good exchange. Last night at 8:51, I sent an email to the LUPS group asking that the same thing that y'all did with CPA assessments, push it back until February, happen to packet B. As the Titan guy just of the amendments in B have been even basically vetted by anybody but the writers of them. Mr. Benton said last meeting he wasn't even aware of the impact of any of all of those amendments. Right after B became public on June 5th, I asked what the intention was. Are you going to treat B with the same value and weight as you did packet A? I got no response from anybody on LUPS. Ms. Jones, the chair, tells a journal reporter what their intentions are for LUPS, and that appears in the paper today. I got to say that that's a massive sign of disrespect for all the neighborhood folks who have been trying to follow what's going on. To go to the reporter, but not to neighborhood associations and coalitions, I consider a slap in the face. And we've been at this for over a year. And for that to turn into that today, I think is a sign that, once again, LUPS and the council will do it to the neighborhoods and the residents of this city without us having the ability to give input.
Regan, please wrap it up. Your time is up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councilor Benton, you have a question?
Just a response to Mr. Regan. I said what I did because the fact is that the amendments in packet B are prerogative of city councilors who have sponsored them. And so I'm not in collusion with anyone on anything that I put forth. And I'm sure the other councilors are not either. However, as representatives of our community, each of us has the right to put forth an amendment in response to community concerns or industry concerns or personal concerns for that matter. And that's the prerogative of city councilor. If Mr. Regan is implying that every thought that crosses the mind of a city councilor must be vetted with his interest group, then he is mistaken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Councilor Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if it might it might be helpful, I think it might be helpful if either Ms. Schultz or Ms. Morris could again tell us some of the sources for those amendments in packet B. That they, because I understand they didn't all come from counselors, but they came from EPS, possibly other places. Do I have that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I think Ms. Morris might be able to do that for us.
Madam Chair, Councillor Gibson, yes. Packet B kind of breaks down into three general categories. The first category is amendments drafted in response to EPC notices, conditions in the notice of decision, either a request from the EPC or changing something that the EPC did in their notice of decision. The second category is items that were discussed at the EPC, either raised by the neighborhoods or the development community, but that the EPC chose not to make a recommendation on. And then the third category are items that are new to the discussion, but that have been raised to a councillor by a constituent since July 2019. Ms. Schultz and I have been keeping a list of concerns that councillors have or have received from their constituents that they wish to address, and those are those newer topics.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillors, are there any more questions? Ms. Schultz, if you would call our next speaker, please.
The next speaker signed up is Jay Remby, who I do not see signed in to this Zoom meeting. So after him is Patricia Wilson. Ms. Wilson, are you connected?
Yes, I am, and I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
I don't have a lot of specifics because I've just been trying to go through amendments today, but I might echo some of Mr. Regan's discussion that I feel like there's just not enough time or understanding of what's going through with some of this. And I'm especially concerned about the Oxbow project and cluster development, because that's the first big major cluster development project. And if we get it wrong, there's no fixing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your coming to talk with us. Ms. Schultz?
The next speaker is Becky Davis. Ms. Davis, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Okay, apparently host has stopped my video.
You are able to enable your video at this time if you'd like. There you go.
Good evening, Ms. Davis.
Thank you. I submitted comments. I will read them here. Dear Councillor Jones and LUPS members, the proposed amendments, packet A and B, and technical edits are still too turgid and obscure for mere citizens to comprehend. We taxpayers of Albuquerque look to LUPS and the Planning Department to show an appreciation for Albuquerque's public health, safety, and welfare, and for its future livability. All the edits and amendments need proper explanation and definition. I'll move on. The amendment A10. This amendment does not go far enough. Please remove all references to the maximum extent practicable from the IDO. If the IDO regulations are to work, they must be obeyed by developers, EPC, and the DRB without waiver or variance. Amendment A18. Don't reduce parking breadth and depth in this city. Don't provide a special exemption for one neighborhood. A18 does not help the health or welfare of Albuquerque. Amendment A4, revise cluster development, and yes, rescind Amendment B4. B4 would allow too many bad developments. Amendment B5, density. You've already withdrawn it, but the IDO can define a grocery store. Therefore, it can define density in terms of people, not dwelling units. I won't belabor the issue. Thank you for the work you have done in the planning department and all the heavy lifting on these many turgid, involved amendments and technical edits. Please keep the long-range future of Albuquerque topmost in your minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
The next speaker is Ms. Ward. Ms. Ward, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
I believe I was unmuted by the host. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We can hear you.
Okay. So these comments pertain to the red line version of the IDO update. There are multiple instances of increased allowances, decreased requirements, and permissive use changes being put in the IDO and being referred to as technical edits. There appears to be whole cloth creation of development uses or redefined or special areas or small areas, and these actions need much further scrutiny. And it appears that inconsistency has been introduced in the various buffer requirements that we saw before with the 330 feet, no 300 feet, no 330 feet, that appears to have returned. Note the creation of the oxymoronic use, conservation development. This new use appears to be the same as cluster development. So what purpose would it serve other than to obfuscate? Of particular concern is the attempt to upzone Coors Boulevard, a major transit corridor, by adding MT corridors to the UC-MSPT areas where extra allowances for workforce housing and parking reductions are granted. This action directly undermines the expressed desire of the City Council to maintain Coors Boulevard as a major transit corridor with regard to allowed uses as previously established. And there are many examples of what appear to be variants by tech edit that bypass due process. On behalf of the SRM&A Board of Directors, I request rejection of the proposed conservation development use, rejection of MT corridors being open to workforce housing and parking reduction bonuses or allowances, and a thorough public examination of the hundreds of proposed changes to the IDO. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Deborah Conger. Ms. Conger,
Hi.
you
Can
are
you
free
hear
to
me?
speak now. We sure can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, counselors. My name is Debbie Conger. I live in the South Los Altos neighborhood. I am requesting a change in clause 43D17G under light fueling stations to clarify the spirit and intent of the law. The law is meant to protect residential use in residential zones from potential adverse effects from some non-residential uses. Recently, I became aware of an application for a fueling station proposed at an intersection near my home. I became aware of this because of a maximum setback variance request. Although the request was in regard to the setback, my initial concern was about yet another fueling station being put in at an intersection where there are already fueling stations on 2 of the 4 corners. During the course of a facilitated meeting with the applicant's architect, I heard concerns brought up by Town Park residents. Town Park is directly to the north of where this fueling station is proposed and is a residential development. Concerns about emissions and inability to get certain mortgages when so close to a fueling station were brought up. After hearing these concerns, I looked at the IDO to see why a conditional use approval process was not followed. And that's when I saw that the clause was written, if located to any residential zone district, and I might note zone district is not capitalized, so that leaves some interpretation there. But adjacent to any residential zone district, this use shall require a conditional use approval. And I found out the applicant was not required to apply for this conditional use because Town Park, although a community of residences, is zoned PD. I see this as a technicality in the way the clause is written, and it needs to be rewritten to clarify that the spirit of intent of the law was to protect residential areas. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for being here this evening. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Renee Horvath. Ms. Horvath, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Okay. Thank you. I'm with the Taylor Ranch and the West Side Coalition, and I did send in comments this afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Horvath, we can.
Okay, thank you. I did focus on packet A, but I do have to agree with the previous speakers that this is a pretty immense undertaking to look at packet A, packet B, and the red line draft and try to address all these issues in comments, written comments, much less trying to do it in 2 minutes. So we do have some issues that we'd like to talk to more lengthily, but please read my comments. And I will start with packet A and start with cluster development, because I really always love that concept of cluster development, because I can see it being beneficial near open space areas particularly. And we have a good example like with Lalu's development here on the west side, with houses on one side, open space on the other. And since the west side has a lot of open space like the petroglyphs, we do see problems when houses are too close to sensitive areas, such as the escarpment. We've seen flooding issues, drainage, erosion issues, wildlife conflicts. But the best designs that we have in Taylor Ranch along sensitive areas, if there's a large enough buffer and a single loaded street to separate the development. So I like the cluster development being proposed with the meandering street and the clusters on each side, but I do think we need another design to show us a lot, the cluster on one side with a single loaded street and a large buffer on the other side. So we should consider another design element to demonstrate other types of clusters, particularly near sensitive areas. The other issue I have.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Your time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here this evening. Councilor Benton?
Yes, Madam Chair. I did want to follow up on Ms. Horvath's question about the single loaded streets, and just, is that addressed in the new cluster development language?
Madam Chair, Councillor Benson, the single loaded street is actually in a different subsection. So it would apply if they are adjacent to major public open space, whether it's a cluster development or not. At present in the IDO, the preferred treatment adjacent to major public open space for a development is a single loaded street. And however, there's a waiver option that if the open space superintendent does not want this as the treatment. So for example, if there are erosion issues or concern about access to areas that are sensitive, a landscape buffer can be requested. The IDO red line proposes to increase that landscape buffer from, I believe, 20 feet to 45 feet. I can see Ms. Schultz nodding her head, so I think I've got the numbers right on that. So that would apply no matter what type of development is adjacent to the major public open space, and that would include cluster development.
Thank you.
Councilors, are there any other questions? Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Leah Armstrong.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. I thank you, Madam Chair, for your time tonight, and councilors. I am here to speak in favor of Councilor Jones' amendment to A8 drive-throughs. It's kind of unprecedented times for everybody. And believe it or not, the things that best weathered this storm, the food guys that best weathered this storm were actually drive-through retailers. So it just kind of reiterated the importance of why we need to have them in smart developments and in smart areas. But I am in favor of Councillor Jones' amendment to A8. I am also wanting to speak against B21. It seems too vague to be spread across the entire city. So I think it needs some work before we can make that make sense for the rest of the city. And so I am against B21. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Kelly Cockrell. Ms. Cockrell, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, my name's Kelly Cockrell, and my comment is in regards to light vehicle fueling station, and that section is 43D 17G. And I am piggybacking off of Debbie Conger's statements regarding inclusivity of planned developments. She just spoke about 3 or 4 speakers back. In this section, the verbiage states, if located adjacent to any residential zone district, this use shall require a conditional use approval pursuant to subsection 14.6, blah, blah, blah. I would like to request that in that language where it says, if located adjacent to any residential zone, be changed to, if located adjacent to any residential zone as well as planned development zones, this use shall require a conditional use approval. And the reason why I request this is because humans and other living beings thrive in planned development zones as well. I know this because I live in Town Park, which is a planned development. Why would the city not want to protect its residents from potential disasters or adverse effects in planned development zones like they do in residential zones? Any area that has humans living in it should receive the same protections as any other area. For instance, an application has been submitted to put up this gas station near us, and their first set of gas pumps shall be 50 feet from our community walls and less than 100 feet from several of our houses. Now, because of the semantic and incredibly sketchy language of residential zones versus planned development zones, our community shall not be protected by conditional use permits. And why? We all pay property taxes here.
Ms. Cockrell, thank you so very much. Ms. Cockrell, thank you. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
The next public speaker is Eric Johnson. Mr. Johnson, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I would like to talk about Amendment B21 and the cumulative impacts. Overall, I thought the purpose of the IDO was to provide clarity, and this amendment, I think, does the opposite, at least the way it's currently, its current state. The details of the cumulative impact study are extremely vague and would be left for immense interpretation. In general, I think the amendment is overly burdensome on development. The additional requirements would negatively impact development and hurt job growth. From a practical standpoint, the large majority of entitled industrial land that can be used for transportation or industrial purposes is already within a quarter mile of residential. So it's gonna, I think it's overly burdensome and gonna impact most every new development in town. So I am against Amendment B21. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, the next speaker is, gosh, I'm sorry if I butcher your last name, Michael Belaskovitz.
That's correct.
Wonderful. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. My name is Mike Bolosowitz. I'm a civil engineer with Bohannon, Houston, and I'm calling specific in reference to Red Line Amendment 5-7C2 that was requested as a part of the Water Authority pertaining to walls. Currently, they're asking that walls not be allowed in their easements at all. And the way that it's currently written, it's noted as shall. And I have a number of projects that we're currently working on that we work hand in hand with the Water Authority to adjust our plans and or work with them directly to ensure that either the wall is minimally in their easement or not. And having the word shall in the language results in some challenges down the road as it relates to approval. So my request for this effort is to the possibility of amending that language as a part of that red line. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for appearing tonight. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Deborah Meyer. Miss Meyer, you should be unmuted. Go ahead and begin your comment.
Thank you. Good evening, counselors. My comments are in line with Kelly Cockrell's and Debbie Conger's. I'm requesting a change in clause 4-3D17G to comply with the spirit and intent of the law, so a light fuel applicant would be required to apply for conditional use in PD zoned areas. This is particularly pertinent in a current situation where a gas station wants to build right next to a neighborhood zone PD. In this case, the gas station is, of course, not required to apply for conditional use. And they would be right on the other side of my wall, and I live in Town Park. There would be many negative effects on our community because of this, but most important to me is the negative impact on health. Kelly said, and I agree, the gas pumps from the maps show that they'll be within 50 feet of the homes. Creating a danger of explosion I recognize is rare, but also emitting fumes associated with the gasoline. Specifically, the carcinogen benzene is emitted as a vapor from fuel storage tanks. Benzene is a known cause of childhood leukemia and other cancers. Our population includes the elderly as well as families with young children. These are both vulnerable populations and they are susceptible to the environmental hazards that a gas station will bring. Other problems associated with this will be respiratory ailments with potentially dangerous aggravations of asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. Benzene, the carcinogenic vapor is hematotoxic. It poisons the blood. It causes leukemia, lymphoma, multiple myeloma. Studies show that statistically significant increases of leukemia are associated with people who have been exposed to benzene. I'm a hospice nurse. I've seen people die from cancer, from lung cancer, from blood cancer. They fear suffocating in their last minutes. If we could do something to affect the environment, because the environment is a determinant of health, if we can control this and prevent the gas station.
Thank you, ma'am, for appearing tonight. Your time is up. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next public speaker is Jamie Jaramillo. Ms. Jaramillo, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Councilors. My name is Jamie Jaramillo. I'm with Argus Investment Realty and Sedbury & Associates. My comments today are regarding Amendment B21, Cumulative Impacts. The intent of this amendment, as stated, is to protect specific neighborhoods or communities, with an emphasis on specific, that have historically been burdened with large factories, processing plants, and junkyards more than others. This is something I think we can all support. 2 or 3 neighborhoods should not carry all that weight. With that said, this regulation should not be applied to the city as a whole, but to those 2 or 3 neighborhoods. Jim Strozier, Principal of Consensus Planning, submitted a letter for Council's review on June 23rd. I fully support the recommendations made in this letter regarding the need to identify the specific neighborhoods to which this amendment applies, and the need for the city to conduct the baseline analysis on which to compare future project impacts in those specific neighborhoods. In closing, the IDO is not perfect, but this process allows us to make it stronger and in support of the comprehensive plan. The IDO is supposed to be an implementation tool for the comprehensive plan. With that said, the comprehensive plan names infill as a priority in 63 locations and specifically names infill as a priority in 20 goals, policies, and actions. As written, this cumulative impact amendment will decrease the number of all infill projects if applied generally throughout the city. I urge your support of either changing the amendment per Mr. Strozer's letter submitted on June 23rd or by completely withdrawing the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jaramillo. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Peggy Neff. Ms. Neff, go ahead and unmute yourself at this time. Ms. Neff, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me
Great.
now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Comments? Good evening, councilors, Madam Chair. Thank you for having us here. Amazing that you think this is appropriate for the city of Albuquerque, but we're trying to help you get through it. Civil remedies, A3, you need to take and build a database so this information is available to all people. A4 and B4, cluster development, throw them both out and revise the entire issue of cluster development. You can read my notes on it. A9, general retail sizes. No, you want to focus on small businesses being small businesses. A13, requirements for NR zones, recommending deferral so that this can be drafted as per the expected amount of employees, not per a category. A6, notification and facilitation of meeting procedures. I have had terrible, terrible experiences here. Add in that a comment period for neighborhoods regarding the report and for developers regarding the report that's submitted should be able to add their comments back in that are taken out. Building heights, giving more protections for communities is important. Remove residential zones from this amendment. Common open space definition. Don't include utilities in common open spaces. Parks in open spaces, yes, add to open space. We all need open space. You go and talk about definite problems with the technical edits. You have my comments on those. Cumulative impacts. This is a great start, but it doesn't go far enough. We need 50% on the surrounding. We need to also address lots where neighborhoods are not organized. We need to address PC and PD zoning as if they were neighborhoods. You got to do a whole review of that PC and PD zoning because it didn't work. You can't marginalize economically poor communities.
Thank you, Ms. Neff, your time is up.
Criteria
needs
to be revised.
Neff, your time is up.
Yes. I get.
Okay, our next public speaker is Kathleen Adams. Ms. Adams, go ahead and mute yourself.
Good evening. I'm very glad to be here and I really appreciate your time. I want to say specifically that I appreciate the planners who are here today. I appreciate Shanna and Petra who have made themselves available to work with citizens. And I want to say that I'm very representative of citizens, and you need to hear me because I am representative. I have no financial interest in development. I have community interest in making Albuquerque be the best it can be. I have little or no interest in how the IDO results in a final product, but I am here to criticize the process. I am attending the meeting so that I can learn, and I need more opportunities to learn. I cannot access the amount of information that you have presented to us in technical edits. It is overwhelming, and it is quite inaccessible for people such as myself who want to be able to participate with knowledge, even if we lack the expertise. So I'm suggesting that you need to look at how you're organizing this. And I am suggesting that you might want to have more meetings like this, covering smaller amounts of information, so that people from neighborhoods can hear each other's comments and have conversations about what seems to make most sense. We're the ones who live here. We're the ones who can talk to you about impact and about the visual effect of what things are going to look like. And I did want to make a brief comment about B5, but it's off, or B4. And what I wanted to say was that I was very offended by someone who at last meeting a week ago said that if we had any density requirements, it was going to make it almost impossible for developers to build affordable housing. And if you can't build affordable housing in a pleasing, less dense way, then you need to go back to architecture school, because I'm sure that—
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Your time is up. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
The next public speaker is Peggy Norton. Ms. Norton, go ahead and unmute yourself at this time.
Hi, I'm Peggy Norton, president of the North Valley Coalition. I agree with what's been said, specifically Kathleen Adams, that the process for all of this could be a lot more informative and discussion oriented. Some specific things, the cannabis issue, I saw where the distance from residence was 1,000 feet reduced to 330 feet. I really think we need to address the growing and processing impacts of cannabis. Cottage development being reduced to a 1/4 acre. We had so many meetings on cottage development with planning and other members of the community. I really would, and I don't even know if it's going to impact the North Valley corridor, because so much of the zoning went from R1 to MXM. So B2, the increase in heights, we don't support that. Nothing about a maximum says you have to build up to the maximum and then add some more onto it. B23, that opposes eliminating significant adverse impact mitigation by the DRB. I think that's a serious issue that they should be addressing. And B21, I know there was a lot of comment last time around. And it affects a lot more than just one neighborhood cumulative impact. So I'm really glad to see you're addressing it. I don't know if there's a clearer way to write the B21, but I think that is important to neighborhoods. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Sneff. Thank you for being here this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, our final speaker of the evening is Loretta Naranjo Lopez. Ms. Naranjo Lopez, go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Good evening. My name is Loretta Naranjo Lopez. I'm a member of the Santa Barbara Martinez Town Neighborhood Association, and I've already raised my hand, and I would just like to state for the record that we had no impact on the IDO at all. So the integrated development ordinance effect when it was cast was to omit the sector development plans and all public hearing processes which critically affected neighborhoods of color. The amendments that are numerous do not address these two issues. So the one major issue that I want to address is that the HNA recommends approval of B21 cumulative impacts. That also affects our neighborhood, and this is necessary to stop the discrimination against our neighborhoods. This is a necessary text amendment. We were not able to look at all this. This is an extensive list, and there's not enough time. But one of the other issues is a construction contractor facility and yard. We recommend denial of this in the NRC. This is a use that emits toxins and noise pollution and should not be accepted in any of our neighborhoods. The other issue that we raised was B2. There is no reason for us to extend more height it really impacts the city of Albuquerque with these buildings that are not in character with our neighborhood. And I think we need to go back as planners to review the state statute regarding this. We raised a lot of other issues regarding the CPA. This issue was discussed with staff, but they were not clear. They did not have a clear process in understanding the CPA. And we expressed its disapproval of the process at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Anjo Lopez. Your time is up. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you. Councilor Benton, I've been watching your hand raised. You're very patient. Do you have a question?
I had a question about two things. First, I want to make clear to anyone who is listening that we are going to take a hard look at B21. We did, in the initial mapping, look at that as a citywide. I would certainly not want to eliminate the neighborhoods which have historically been affected by cumulative impacts and need to be protected at this time. But I want to make clear that with regard to any of these, we are going to be deferring these for a month until August action. And so there's a lot of time to call our staff. As one of the speakers said, our staff is great about taking your call and specifically answering your question. So I think that's really important to know. I did want to ask about the speakers from Town Park and the gas station. That apparently the PD zones are being treated differently from another low density residential zone. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, give me just a moment to pull up that use specific standard and I can tell you what the language reads. So the IDO today says that if located adjacent to any residential zone district, this use shall require a conditional use approval. So the public commenters accurately read this use specific standard. PD and PC zones are not considered residential zones. It's only the zones that have the R in front of them, so R1, RA, RT, etc. So any PD or PC zone would not be considered for that conditional use approval.
So PD and PD and which PT?
PD and PC.
PC are can contain low density residential, however. They're a pass along from the old zoning code of properties that were developed with a governing site development plan approved by the EPC, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, yes, that's correct.
I'm wondering if there's I'm also wondering, of course, depending on what we do, if anything, much with cumulative impacts, B21, would that address this? Because aren't fueling facilities presently in the language in B21?
Madam Chair, Councilor Benton, yes, they are under the use category of motor vehicle related uses. We talk about that category as a whole, and light vehicle fueling station is within that category. However, if I can pull up the language quickly, I believe the cumulative impact ordinance or amendment also refers to residential zone districts, not residential uses.
Right. So I think this is something we need to look at further, and I'm very interested in it. And just in general, with regard to the obtuseness of what we're talking about today, it is, and so was the previous zoning code, extremely obtuse for the average citizen. And then we go in and we're changing it, and I can understand why it would seem to be overwhelming, but this is the process we have established. And also, I think many of these questions, especially when they're related to individual communities in the city, will be properly and extensively be given a venue for discussion and for understanding as part of the community planning area process. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's why we've been frustrated in just getting started with that process so far, because it was established upon adoption of the IDO, but we just finished kicking a can on that one down the road till early next year, understandably because of the COVID and so forth. But I just want everyone to understand that I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity to delve into this, and a lot more face-to-face time with the great planners like the folks we have in the council staff, but also in the planning department for the community to understand some of the land use regulations somewhat better. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. And Councilor Gibson, thank you for your patience. You've had your hand waving for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make an observation and then say one other thing real quickly. First of all, the observation is that we've heard from a number of people who, like the gas stations near the planned development, being concerned about having, exhaust fumes and gasoline fumes and that type of thing, which is very understandable. And I can't remember, there was someone else who was talking about something else that made me think of this. And then on the other hand, we have several people who've spoken against one of the amendments, B21, I think it is. Yeah, the cumulative impact statement, that would be too onerous, or I don't remember what all I heard about it, but they thought that it was a little too much to be asking. And I would say that I think that we've had several people giving us evidence for the need for B21. So I think that's something for us all to think about and contemplate as we go forward with these amendments. Second of all, the other thing that I've heard several times tonight, we all have, Councilor Benton just spoke about it, was that this is moving too quickly. And I understand that too, because it's a lot to get through. I have to give myself breaks in reading through it, but I think it might be helpful. And I know that our planning staff has done a really good job in communicating with constituents who do have questions or issues with some of these amendments. But I'm wondering if we could give the website or how to get copies of the packets, both A and B, and perhaps how to find the IDO in the city web pages. Could we do that, please?
Councilor Gibson, thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. Schultz to answer that question for you.
Madam Chair, Councilor Gibson, yes, the packets of amendments are available online. I can list that website now if it's helpful, if folks would like to write it down. They can also always reach out to Ms. Morris or myself, and we're happy to forward them to the correct location to get these documents. That website is abc-zone, so zone.com. On that webpage, on the front page, you'll see kind of a box that talks about the 2019 annual update. on that front page, you can find a link to Amendment Packet A as it has been revised since our last LEPS hearing, Amendment Packet B as it has been revised since our last LEPS hearing, and you can also find a link to an interactive draft of the IDO that incorporates the recommended changes from the Environmental Planning Commission. All three of those can be found on that website I just listed.
Does that help, Councilor Gibson? Thank you. And Councilor, thank you, Ms. Schultz. Councilor Borrego, thank you for your patience. You have your hand up.
I did, Counselor, thank you. My other phone is ringing. I'm sorry for that. I guess I, first of all, would like to say that I don't envy the staff because they have a lot of work ahead of them. And there are people, I'm sorry, I have two phones ringing now. There are
Councilor Borrego, your microphone has stopped working. Councilor Borrego, we are unable to hear you. Councilor Borrego? Okay, looks like she saw me.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, we can hear you now.
Let me start again so that I have my thoughts together. I don't envy the staff because there are a lot of amendments included in this. And these are not just technical amendments. There are some very substantial amendments that are included in here. I'm glad to see the cumulative amendment. It's a start. There's a lot more that needs to happen. And I think that, for example, in the fueling station, when we talk about a planned development area, that is by default a residential area. And we should not be eliminating, we should be inclusive of all residential areas, whether they be planned development or single family residential. So that would be my first comment with regard to that specific issue that was raised. In terms of conservation versus cluster development, I think that we need to take some time and really look at that cluster idea, because different people have different definition of what cluster means. And so I think it's really important, especially on the west side, where we have, and also along Tramway and areas like that, where we have a lot of open space in the North Valley. We need to be careful to be able to preserve those qualities of our community that, enhance our lifestyle, I guess you could say, or a healthy lifestyle, and encourage people to walk. And I know, Councillor Benton, you've been wanting to, you've been working a lot on that with bike lanes and that sort of thing. So I think we really need to take the time, and if it means that in August that we take a little more time. And as you all know, when I got on LEPS, that's the one thing that I wanted to do with IDO. And so now I'm kind of seeing that maybe, we do need to take that time, because the community is telling us that. And it will even be better for the developers, because they will have a much more quality development. So, we have a month and a half now, and, I support the deferral. Councillor Jones, thank you for pushing that forward. And I look forward to hearing from the community some more.
Thank you, Councilor Borrego. I believe that concludes our comments. Councilors, do you have any other questions or comments? If not, Councilor Benton, would you like to close this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And agree with a lot of what Councilor Borrego just said, and something to think about during our month and plus time that we have. Many of these are have not raised any controversy, and you know, I don't know whether we could do a staggered approval on this as a council or as a committee. When there is a volume like this, it's hard to delve into the let's say 4 or 5 that have really risen to the top of the comment list here today. So I'd like to speak more with staff about how we might be able to do that and not leave everything else dangling while we tackle some of the tougher ones like cumulative impacts, which I think we know where we need to go with that to protect communities. But it did raise my eyebrows really when I guess I never knew that Town Park was a planned development, but it is a beautiful, you know, well, it's old now. It was a modern residential development at the time. And I've had, for Councilor Gibson's time, we had the Smith's gas station at Carlisle and Constitution. I mean, that was a firestorm of, you know, an old neighborhood that used to have a little 1-pump gas station with a mechanic stall in it. And it became a 12-pump Smith's gas station fueling facility. And, you know, that was a failure of the old code, not this one, but that's the kind of thing we're trying to prevent with this one. So thanks everybody for your attention to this. And I know it's it can warp your mind looking at it sometimes, but believe me, the old one did too. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess we did move for the deferral, right? Or did we?
Not yet. If you would like to do that.
I'll move the deferral until the next one.
That would be a deferral until the next LUPS meeting on August 12th. And Councilor Borrego has seconded that. We'll do a roll call on that one.
Councilor Benton.
Yes.
Councilor Borrego. Councilor Borrego.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes.
Councilor Gibson.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes. Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
That passes on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you for everyone who participated, especially our staff who worked so hard on this. And there being no further business, this LUPS committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.